this is going to be our final selection of the semester. And we go off with a bang, metaphorically and figuratively and anything but physically, right? Today we talk about war and also about a very special person. Uh, we've been addressing very interesting themes in this collection. I don't know if you've been able to appreciate it, but I appreciate very much the opportunity to enjoy these selections and see what they have to say about a variety of things that we've been reading about, things such as the cost of materialism, the beauty of sacrificial love, um, how life can be seen as a journey, and the importance of choices. These are powerful things. These are powerful themes. And I think it's wonderful that literature allows us the opportunity to engage these very important subjects about life and hopefully learn something that will improve our life. You know, that when we began this course, the first lesson that I gave you was titled, How Can Literature Improve My Life or Make Me a Better Person? And I think that reading things like these and meditating upon them and absorbing the lessons that they have to teach us can accomplish these things in our life. So I hope that you have been mature enough, smart enough, wise enough to take advantage of what is being offered to you. And today we're going to be addressing a very ugly subject, but a very important subject because it is part of humanity, part of who we are. So we're going to be addressing war, but as I said, we're going to be filtering it through the thoughts of someone who I have a great deal of respect for. How many of you have ever heard of Albert Einstein? Okay, and does anybody mind or care telling me what's the most important thing that you have heard about him? Yeah, he, among other theories, he is responsible for six very famous theories in the area of physics. But his most famous theory is the theory of relativity. And that theory is encapsulated in the very famous formula E equals mc squared. In an interview, one interviewer once asked him, "How can you explain that theory?" And it deals with time, space, and his answer is fantastic. He said, "Well, the best explanation that I have for my theory is um, how time is." He's talking about how time is relative, and he said, "Have you ever touched something very, 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 very hot for a minute? That minute felt like an hour. Touch a beautiful woman for an hour, and it feels like a minute. That's relativity." That was his answer, right? And he was a funny guy. It's a very smart guy, a very funny guy. Um, a very bad student also. I heard that a guy, such a brilliant mind, a genius, and I don't throw around that word casually. Okay, he was literally a genius, and he was a very funny guy, and he spoke about many many subjects. Not just He did not just limit himself to the area of physics and help us understand the universe better. He predicted black holes. He predicted many things through his theories, and we know that black holes today are our reality. And he changed our perception of how we understand space and time. They are not separate things. They are they are the fabric that makes the universe. They are very much intertwined together, time, space. So this is not a physics class, of course. I'm just giving you a little bit of information of Albert Einstein, so you, if those of you that did not know who this person was, can have an understanding of who we're going to be dealing with here today. So, as I said, he spoke about many issues. He was European Jew, and before the beginning of World War II, he emigrated to America. In 1940, he became a U.S. citizen, right? But he was not naturally born American. He was an immigrant that became an American. And Albert Einstein spoke about many issues. For example, he spoke about racism. On the issue of racism, he wrote a letter where he said that I see that in America, the whites live separate lives from the blacks. It's not because it is a disease of the black, it is a disease of the white. The very powerful words, right? Um, what do you think about that? What do you think about that statement? Yeah, and unfortunately, madam, we will always see it because the human heart is also diseased. Unfortunately, right? That doesn't mean that we should give up either, right? We should continue striving for the common good. Okay, in spite of our limitations, we should always aspire to be more and to be better than who and what we are. So Einstein also spoke about war, and you're going to be reading about what he said about war. It's going to seem a little bit contradictory, but if you understand what he's saying, you will not see the contradiction at all. I would like to ask you, what issues do people struggle with during times of war? Anybody? What issues do people deal with in times of war? Why? Why did that happen? Okay, so you remember you guys read Old Man on a Bridge, and you know that the story takes place in the middle of a war, and you could, even though none of us has ever experienced being in a battlefield or being in the middle of a war, thank God for that, right? But I think that's the only thing that we haven't gone through because we've gone through so many things. We have read about what it's like being in a war. And not only that, but if you guys watch news, you can see that all the time. Because right now, I don't think there's a moment where there's not a war going on some part of the planet. That's who we are. And one of the things that you read in that story was that you get displaced. I mean, you have bombs falling all over you, destroying your neighborhood, or you have shots being fired and people in your neighborhood are being killed, and you got to get out of there. You got to get out of Dodge City. That's one of the problems that war creates, this human displacement. And that also causes a bunch of other problems. Who else? What other problems are caused by war? It damages, it creates an environmental disaster. Very well said. It damages, it ravishes the environment. The more powerful the weapons used, the more damage to the environment. Because you use weapons to kill people, and people are not in a vacuum. People are in an environment. So when you're attacking people, you're attacking that environment also. So it all gets blasted, right? And as I said, the more powerful the weapon, the worse it is. What's the most powerful weapon in the planet that we have so far? And don't say that it's the pen, okay? The pen is mightier than the sword. What was that again? Nuclear weapons. We have nuclear weapons, and the nuclear weapons that we have are just terrible. the power that they have, and how damaging they can be, and how long lasting uh, that damage can be. If we ever had a nuclear war, that will most likely be the end of the world. Literally, it will be the end of the world. Not the end of the world as we know it. It's game over. It's game over. I'm a child of the Cold War. I lived most of my life in an era that was known as the Cold War, which was a period of rivalry between the United States of America and the Soviet Union. And we lived in constant fear of there being a nuclear war. And we came super close to one in October of 1962. It's the closest we have ever been. It was like a hair away. Something called the Cuban Crisis. And there was a standoff between American vessels and Russian vessels, and it was a very ugly affair. And we were this close to beginning a war. But thank God it didn't happen because we're here. We're here talking. But nuclear wars can do that. But we have, the wars that we usually have are conventional wars, right? Where you have people like with tanks and airplanes and bombers and things like that, not nuclear. So God forbid, right, that we ever have one. Anybody else? Any other problem that you understand is associated to war? Yeah, people die. I mean, what's worse than that? You die, your family dies, people die. Not just the soldiers fighting the war, but you have something called collateral damage, and that's even worse. If we talk about, you hear about this amount of soldiers died in this war. Yeah, what about all the civilians that were in the area? Because you're a soldier, at least you have a gun to defend yourself. You're a civilian, you're just there in the middle. So that is terrible. That's the most terrible aspect of uh, of wars. So wars also create material needs because you have these people that are living their lives in their home. They have to abandon them, and they end up in some refugee camp, and they have needs. You have needs for sanitation, like you need bathroom, you need potable water, uh, food, and that's terrible. You have the loss of life, like you guys said already. We also have geographical displacements. People, that civil war in Syria from a few years ago was horrible. I think that more than 2 million people. That's not a small chunk of people. More than 2 million people, and maybe I'm underestimating. Uh, were displaced, and they moved all around the world, especially to Europe, because now you look at Syria before the war, you look at Syria today, and it's night and day. It's a smoking ruin of a country. You have your separation from loved ones. It might be from the displacement, the families get separated, or it might be from death, the result of death. You lose a family member. And then you have health hazards. They can be the results of what happens to the environment. Uh, you guys see that picture there? Okay, what is that picture of? Is it just any explosion? You're seeing the famous mushroom cloud that is the result of a nuclear explosion. That's from a test. Because they like to test the bomb to see how they work and how beautiful they destroy everything. And they are usually done in remote areas, right, in deserts or sometimes in the ocean, right? And they wreak havoc on the environment. These tests, but they just show how devastating these weapons are. They're terrifying. They're terrifying. These weapons are very radioactive, and once they explode, that area where they exploded, other than being blasted, remains radioactive for decades or even centuries. So you cannot even go to where that bomb exploded because you can get contaminated. You can with radiation and die. It poisons you. It kills you. So there's no doubt in that. There should be no doubt in anybody's mind how devastating uh, a war can be, whether it's nuclear or not. And the reading that you're going to be doing today, you're going to be synthesizing. We have defined synthesizing many times already, so you guys should be not only familiar with the concept of synthesis, but with the methodology and the workflow of synthesis. You're going to be synthesizing four selections that you're going to be reading to formulate an opinion about Albert Einstein's position on war. And I shared this with you before, right? What the workflow of synthesis is like. So you'll follow those steps to draw conclusions. What you will be reading today includes a selection titled Weapons of the Spirit, a letter to President Roosevelt, which was sent to him during the Second World War on the abolition of the threat of war and the arms race. I want to begin by telling you that Albert Einstein was a pacifist. And somebody tell me what's a pacifist? Okay. Who else? What does it mean to be a pacifist? Okay. All right. A pacifist is someone that advocates for peace. And if you advocate for peace, you are against war. And I'm telling you that Albert Einstein was a pacifist. But you're going to be reading at least two selections here where Albert Einstein is giving advice or sharing thoughts about how we should conduct war. Because Albert Einstein was also a very practical man. And even though he was against war, it does not mean that he did not understand the reality of war and how it had to be managed or controlled. Because there are some things that you can never get rid of. Earlier, we were talking about racism and how bad it is, and we see it every day. Racism is not going anywhere. Should we strive to eliminate it? Yes, with every fiber of our being. But we have to do it with the understanding so we will not get frustrated. That it is a war that never ends. That is a never ending battle. Do you understand what I'm saying? Some things you struggle with all your life, and somebody else picks up the fight because that is better than not fighting at all and giving up. But understanding that there are some things that we're never going to get rid of, but at least if we try to, we can minimize them. And Albert Einstein understood that. So he was not like daydreaming, believing in unicorns and the tooth fairy and any of those things. He was a very practical person, but still he believed that there should be no war, that war should not exist. Understanding that it will. And I ask you a question, guys. Somebody spoke earlier about violence, about being against violence. I can ask the question another way. Is there a moment when violence is acceptable, or it's never acceptable? Never. How many of you agree with her? that it's never acceptable. I'm sorry? Could you give us an example? Let me help you. Let me help you. If you're walking down the street at night and you hear some screams, and you're not walking alone, you're walking with a couple of friends, and you see that there's one man trying to attacking a woman. He's hitting her, he's trying to probably rape her or something like that. What will you do? How? Sir, please don't respect her. You're invading her personal space. Let me tell you something. I would find a piece of wood or something, or if I saw a trash can, and I would make that guy wear it like a hat. Would that be wrong? No. You know why it's not wrong? Because fighting for justice is never wrong. Fighting for justice will always be the right thing to do. Sometimes, because we live in an imperfect world, it might take the form of a violent act. Does that mean that we believe in violence? No, that's not what it means. We will always try diplomacy first, according to the situation, right? Because the situation that I just presented to you was pretty extreme. There's no moment for diplomacy there because a life is at stake. Okay? Is this making sense to you? So we should always try peace first. We should always give peace a chance first. And sometimes there's no other way but to accept the result if peace doesn't work and not engage violence. And not that I'm not saying that, well, if I don't get my way peacefully, I'm going to get my way violently. That's not what I'm saying either. I'm not advocating for that either. But I'm saying that there are moments where the only solution, and this is, of course, my opinion, you can disagree. There are millions of people that disagree, where there's no other option but violence. Let's say that your country is being invaded, and the people that are coming are exterminating you. And this might sound like something from a movie, something far fetched, but this has happened. Just because you have not experienced this, it doesn't mean that this has not really happened in human history. And when I say human history, I'm not talking about thousands of years ago. It happens, and they're exterminating your community. And you see the soldiers coming with rifle, they're shooting everyone. What are you going to do? Well, let me tell you what I would do. I would run, and I would take my family and I would run. But when you have nowhere to run, what are you supposed to do? Well, but what if that's not going to work? What are you going to say? Please shoot me, sir, shoot me. And your family is there with you. When push that when push comes to shove, if life is at stake, you have the right to defend yourself. Did you know that? Even at the cost of somebody else's life, you have the right to defend yourself. Um, Wars, taking that to wars. Wars are completely unnecessary. You heard the word that I use. I use completely unnecessary. Having said that, 99.9% of every war that has ever happened is unjustified. But there's 0.01% that I left. They are justified. Why? Because they are a fight against evil. Evil should always be fought. And the best example I can give to you is a very recent example. World War II, the war um, that was raging on during the lifetime of Albert Einstein. You know that they call World War II the Good War. Say like what? And we don't like war. We hate war. We detest it. But I agree that World War II was the good war. Why do you think they call it the good war? Because it was justified. What justified it? What was going on in that war? Does anybody know? Why? Why? What did Albert Einstein? Well, I'm sorry. What did Adolf Hitler believe in? It's an issue that is very much in vogue in the United States today. White supremacy. White supremacy. Adolf Hitler believed in white supremacy. Therefore, I have to exterminate and subjugate everybody else because white people are superior. And he began with the Jews, and then he was invading every single country in Europe, and he killed Polish, and he killed Gypsies, and he started killing a bunch of other people. And he had no intentions of stopping there. He was moving toward the east, towards Russia. He was moving southwards towards Africa, and he wanted to get England out of the way so he could move west to America. So you tell me that a maniac that wants to do something like that, you're not going to fight against? It is literally a war of good against evil. Literally. It is. I'm a guy that believes in black and white, but in shades of gray. Okay. And as I told you, I believe that 99.9 of every war that has ever happened has been unjustified. But this war was justified. Not it was not justified that Adolf Hitler began the war because he began the war. It was justified that we met him and said, "Yeah, okay, then here's the line in the sand. Try to cross it so you can see what's going to happen to you." So, as I said, that's my opinion. I don't know if you have a different opinion, but you're going to be reading about what Albert Einstein had to say about war. Very interesting stuff coming from a genius like him. You're going to complete this chart and you're going to send it to me. You're going to upload it. This is the last work that you will upload, and you're going to put that together with the applying your skills section on page 405 from your book. The selection that you're going to be reading, you will find in pages 396 and page 404 of your book. In case you were wondering what's that there, it's a bomb. It's not just any bomb. It's the first atomic bomb that was ever dropped, that was ever used. That bomb that you see there was actually used in a war, not in a test, but in a war. That bomb is called Fat Boy for obvious reasons. And Fat Boy was dropped over Hiroshima, Japan, in July of 1945. It was not as powerful by any stretch of the imagination as the nuclear weapons that we have today, but there was no more powerful weapon in that day than this. Devastating, devastating, devastating. Uh, the amount of people that died was incredible. Some people's shadows were photographed against walls when they went like that from the blast. After the bomb exploded several days, it rained black rain, black radioactive from all of that ash that went up into the atmosphere, all that soot, and mixed with the clouds, and the rain that fell down was black. Incredible damage to the environment. But it was done to finish the war. They said either we continue fighting for more years or we drop this and tell them that we have more and scare them and have them surrender. And that's the way things worked out. They dropped another one a few weeks later in Nagasaki, and the Americans told the Japanese, there's more where this came from, which was not true. But the Japanese bought it, say, oh, we surrender. Okay. And that ended the war. Thank God that ended the war, but at a great cost. Guys, any questions or comments before we leave? I'm sorry? World War II. Remember that the two factions that were fighting were the Allies. The Allies included the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, France. It was basically Australia. You know, they were the good guys, and the bad guys were what we call the Axis. The Axis was Germany, the Nazis, Japan, and Italy. That was the Axis. And we defeated Germany earlier, uh, but the last people to surrender were the Japanese. And it took this. And one of the things that Albert Einstein regretted was that a lot of his research in in the area of physics helped create this monstrous weapon. But that is something that always bothered him very much. Okay, guys, any other question? Then I'll see you guys, God willing, in the afternoon at school. You all take care. Have a great day.